Carter, thank you so much for those kind words of introduction. As I said to you earlier, it is always good to come to Campbellsville. Campbellsville is sacred and hallowed ground for me personally. And to have the opportunity to leave Louisville and the burdens of pastoral responsibilities, the burdens of being the president of the college, and to come to an upper room is so meaningful to me. And what makes it so meaningful is you, Dr. Carter. Simmons College, where I am president, has partnerships with many colleges and universities, but none more important to me than the partnership I have with Campbellsville University. And it is because of who you are and how you reached out to us. I have benefited so much from the relationship and the mentorship of Dr. Carter and Dr. Chowney. And it's just good to be here, if for no other reason, to hear Josh and these singers. I mean, what a gifted group of singers we have heard today. And I want to thank God for you, Josh, and for this great music group. And I know God's going to use you and this great singing aggregation in a wonderful way. This morning, as we celebrate African American History Month, I want to share with you a thought that is based on a parable, a metaphor that the prophet Isaiah used many years ago, but it is a metaphor that is so fitting for all of us because it speaks to one of the great tragedies of life, and that tragedy being the underutilization of our skill sets, the underutilization, the under-maximization of our talents and abilities. And here is a metaphor that Isaiah uses that I hope you will never forget. You may forget that it came from Isaiah. You may forget the points I'm going to make in this brief message. But it is my hope that you will never forget the illustration and the analogy because it is pregnant with power and it locates many people. And it is the root of so much of our personal frustration. Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 20. And this is what Isaiah says. He says, "For the bed is shorter than a man can stretch himself on it, and the covering narrower than he can wrap himself in it." Isaiah says, the bed's too short and the cover's too narrow. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about short beds and narrow covers. Now in Greek mythology, the Greek god of conformity is a Greek god, son of Poseidon, whose name was Procrustes. And Procrustes is called the Greek god of conformity because of what is known in mythology as Procrustes' bed. Procrustes lived in a lair up on the mountain, and whenever people came to visit Procrustes, Procrustes would taint their food with a toxin that would put them to sleep. And when they were asleep, Procrustes would move them from what was known as Procrustes' bed. And it was an interesting bed because if you were too short, and guess what Procrustes would do with your legs? He would stretch your legs to fit the size of the bed. But if you were too long and your legs extended over the bed, then Procrustes would cut your legs off in order to fit within the beds. So we can understand why Procrustes is called the Greek god of conformity, because whatever size you were, Procrustes made sure that you would fit within the context, the size of Procrustes' bed. And that's what conformity is. It is fitting within the scope and the size of a particular situation. Now, I don't know if Isaiah knew anything about the crusties, but Isaiah did know something about conformity, because he uses a similar metaphor in this passage of Scripture that I hope you will never forget. He says, you know, the bed's too short and the blanket's too narrow. He's talking about a person who is laying down in a bed, wants to get some sleep, they're tired. When they lay down in the bed trying to stretch themselves across the bed, they can't stretch themselves the full length of the bed because the bed's too short for them. And to make matters worse, it must have been a cool night, and not only can they not stretch the length of the bed, but they want to get warm, but the coverings, he said, is too narrow, and the person cannot wrap themselves up in the blanket and stay warm in the covering because the covering is too narrow. The bed's too short, the covering's too narrow. Now, there's a particular reason why he's using this illustration. He's using the illustration because there is a colossal superpower, an aggressive superpower that is swallowing up the smaller nations around the nation of Israel. And this colossal superpower is named Assyria. And they are aggressive. And Israel is afraid because Israel does not know how they can keep Assyria at bay. So guess what Israel does? They send envoys to Egypt in hopes that Egypt, an alliance with the pagan Egyptians, will somehow secure them from the aggressiveness of the Assyrian army. And at no time did the people of God, Israel, even think to consider asking God for divine assistance. Instead, they were pragmatists and said, well, let's see if we can get Egypt to protect us. And Isaiah laughs and says, you think that Egypt can protect you against Assyria? You think you can find comfort in Egypt against the might of the great Assyrian army? He said, well, go to Egypt if you want. But guess what? The bed is too short and the cover is too small. In other words, Egypt cannot help you against Assyria. It's not adequate to help you. Well, my brothers and sisters, that's an old metaphor, but it's a new metaphor. Because many of us are seeking solutions in people and things that don't solve, and seek answers in situations that don't provide real answers, only to discover that we're just like the bed that Isaiah describes. We're in a situation in which the bed is too short and the cover's too narrow. And many people live their lives like this. Many people live their lives frustrated, trying to fit into situations that are really too small for them. They're in situations in which the bed is too short and the cover is too narrow. You know, there's a whole lot of people who are only concerned about the length of their life. That's all they're concerned about. And they eat all types of health foods and they exercise because all they're concerned about is living long. You know, when you look at the life expectancy that we have today, and when you study our life expectancy compared to previous years, I find it quite interesting that in the year 1800, the average years a person was supposed to live was 35. That was life expectancy. In 1850, it was 40 years, life expectancy. 1900, it was 49 years. 1960, it was 66 years. Now, in our day, it's about 73 to 74 years. And so we have science and technology, and all science and technology does is to lengthen the years of our life. And for many, that's all people want, is to live long. But if all you want is in life is just to live long, that's all your life, all you can say about my life is I live long, well, let me tell you something. That's the way you live. If that's your philosophy of life, I'm saying to you, the bed's too short and the cover's too narrow. There was a fellow in the Bible by the name of Methuselah, grandfather of Noah. And Methuselah lived 969 years. And all it says about Methuselah is Methuselah lived, had sex, and died. That's all it said about it. Lived, made babies, died. 969 years. You live long, but all you can say about you, Methuselah, is that you lived, had sex, and died. That's it. No one ever wrote a book about you. You lived 969 years. Think of all the food he ate in 969 years. Think of all the water he consumed in 969 years. Think of all the clothes he wore out in 969 years. And all that can be said about Methuselah is that he lived 969 years, lived, begot children, and died. No wonder his grandson didn't invite him to go on the ark with him. See, anybody that lives 969 years and all that can be said of that person is that they lived, begot children, and died, deserves to drown. Because if all you can say about your life is that I'm living long, look how long I live, then I say to you that the bed's too short and the cover is too narrow. Martin Luther King Jr. only lived to be 39. Dietrich Bonhoeffer only lived to be 39 years old. Didn't live long, but it's not how long you live, it's how well you live. It's not your duration, but your donation. And if all you can say about yourself is, I'm living long, that's it, with no contribution, not trying to make a difference, not trying to start a choir that blesses people like Josh and these wonderful sayings before us, not trying to build a strong institution like Campbellsville, not trying to make a difference with your life, all you can say is, I've lived long, then I say to you that the bed's too short. Your bed's too short, and the cover's too narrow. And if some of us don't try to live long, we try to live wide. How you living? I'm living wide, living large. So all we spend our life doing is gathering creature comforts. All we spend our life doing is gathering toys and gadgets, and clothes, and cars. And our society emphasizes that. Live wide, gather stuff. You know, if you ever buy an old house, when it comes to renovating the house, the one thing that most of us have to do, if you're going to buy an old house, the one thing that you have to do is make more closet space. Because in the old houses, they didn't have a lot of closet space. Do you know why? Because they didn't have a lot of clothes. But today, it's clothes on top of clothes on top of clothes, stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff. The desire to acquire, want itis. But guess what? If that's all you have going for you is a lot of stuff and a lot of gadgets, and that's all you want to do is accumulate stuff, and if the only reason you've come to Campbellsville is so you can get a big job, a big education to get a big job so you can accumulate stuff, then I say to you, if that's your life, your bed's too short and the cover is too narrow.